might have eternal life. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. At that time, Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. Now, a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was. But he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short of stature. So he ran ahead and climbed the sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." And he came down quickly and received him with joy. When they all saw this, they began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner?" But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, Behold, half my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over. And Jesus said to him, Today, salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Does life just not seem fair sometimes? Maybe you have a sister who got all the looks or a brother who got all the talent in the family. It can be depressing when we start to think about how much we don't have and how much we want to have. And many fall into the trap of thinking that life should be fair. And so when it isn't, things seem harder. And this is the case in today's gospel. Why is it that Zacchaeus only has to give away half of his possessions to the poor? I mean, half is still quite a bit, and he was giving back 4-fold to those he had wronged. But it seems odd when compared to the other stories of people that Jesus called. Doesn't it seem a little unfair when we compare it to the example of the rich young man? Jesus told him to sell all his possessions, to give them to the poor, and then to come follow him. Why does Zacchaeus only need to give away half? I mean, if the rich young man's total wealth was equal to half of Zacchaeus's, then it would seem that there's a price on heaven and that the rich automatically get an advantage. But that's not the case. There is much going on underneath the surface, and our Lord could read each of their hearts. We see the difference in how they approach Jesus. Zacchaeus is far away, yet he wants to take a closer look. He climbs a tree. It's that effort that he put in that got the attention of Jesus, who then called out to him. It was the effort that he put into trying to learn about the Lord that got Jesus to look at him. In today's world and Western society, there's a false notion of equality. For it to be equal, to be really equal, means to be exactly the same. And no two of us will ever be exactly the same. It means we have to be the same person with the same matter, the same body. Even twins are not truly equal because they are two different people. The now blessed Fulton J. Sheen has the answer, that we need to focus more on being equitable. That means that God calls each of us to different roles, and we are to fulfill those roles as best as we each can. God does not give to us equally, but he does give to us equitably. Speaking different languages was never my thing. Reading is fine, but speaking, completely different ballgame. This is a gift that I don't have, but that's okay. It allows me to rely on others. It allows me to talk to them, enter into a relationship with them, and communicate with them, with people who I otherwise would not have been able to talk to. Because if you have all those talents, how often do you go to someone else to get advice? How often do you go to get help? How often do you share in someone else's life? It can isolate you if you have everything going on. And God does not expect us to excel when he has not bestowed his gifts. Likewise, I will never be a star basketball player, but that's okay, because God does not expect me to be a star basketball player, and he is not unjust in his expectations. For instance, the neurologist does not know as much about joints as the orthopedist. They are both doctors, but they both fulfill their obligations to their patients in different ways. They are not equals, for they both outstrip each other in their respective fields. What matters is that both are experts in their fields, and that they can compassionately and morally apply their practices. It is mastery in their fields that makes them equitable and makes them both experts. If we have all been given different talents in different amounts, we can also expect that we have different inclinations to different sins. We're all attached to different material things in life. For some, it's something you collect. For others, it's money that does it. For others, it's control. And we all have different temptations based on those sentiments. Some folks, like Zacchaeus, are not tempted as much by money, and so can own enough for their means and even a little bit extra. Yet contrast this with the rich young man. Money was too much of a temptation for him, even a little bit of money. Even if he had a little, he would not have been poor in spirit. It is why the Lord called him to sell everything, to free his soul from a particular temptation, and to help him start a new life in the Spirit. And see how willing Zacchaeus is to do everything that the Lord told him to. He climbs down in haste, yet the rich young man went away sad. Zacchaeus welcomed the Lord into his home without any grumbling, without saying a word, and with humble acceptance, with docility to the Lord. While the rich young man was concerned about telling the Lord about how righteous he was and how good he was. And he did all this as they stood outside in the cold. The Lord is not unfair, but he does give us the opportunity to respond with a generous heart whenever he calls us to be more in the spiritual life. And this can take many forms, whether it be adding some prayer time or into your schedule or asking you to give something up. Advent will be upon us before you know it, and you may or may not know it, but it is the start of a new liturgical year, for the church, that is. But this means that you can make a New Year's resolution early. It means that you can start something new to reinvigorate your spiritual life, maybe do something that you should be doing but haven't been this whole time. Ask the Lord what gifts he has given you and how he wants you to use them. Now is a good time to start to plan your Advent so that that season will not catch you off guard, but you, like Zacchaeus, will be able to start with haste and start it well.